Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
You guys seen that? I guess it's like a meme now, but it's just a picture of someone's front porch. I think it was a tweet, actually. It was a picture of someone's front porch was gone from their house. Like someone's actual front porch got stolen in Detroit. And then it's shitty, but it was really funny. Like someone posted out, they tweeted out a picture of their front porch got stolen. And the caption was, "Can't have shit in Detroit." And that's just how I feel right now. These whole holidays, like not getting to do any Christmas at all. I mean, peace and quiet was nice, I'll tell you that. Not getting to do any Christmas at all, and then just looking forward to at least watching some NHL hockey and not getting any of that, and then thinking, oh, well, at least I have the World Juniors. And here we are with just flat out nothing. World Juniors canceled. Can't have anything good.
Well, at least San Jose and Arizona did their best to make up for it last night by scoring 3 weeks worth of goals.
The Arizona Coyotes scored 7 goals and lost.
That just tells you everything you need to know about their season.
Oh, Evan, did I pass something on to you, buddy?
No, I'm going to have more water, though.
Yeah, good luck with that. This has been a gloomy start to the first post-Christmas episode of the Winged Wheel podcast. And I just realized now, our last episode of 2021.
Good.
Befitting. Yeah, befitting of, I guess, the last year or 2 years. But welcome to the Winged Wheel podcast. Here to talk Red Wings hockey, here to talk World Juniors, and far too much public health policy. I'm Ryan Hanna.
Here to dust off my totally real medical doctorate, Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
Metal doctorate.
I got it right on the second. Do you know, I told you what my day was like. If I get out 10 coherent sentences on this podcast, I'm doing way better than expected.
You, Evan looks how you feel right now. I'll say that. And the only reason I'm being mean to Evan is because he didn't ask me how I'm doing. I could be dying, buddy. He didn't even check in.
You look the same.
Thanks. I think.
Well, sure.
You could be dying. Evan sounds like he's dying.
Yeah, he does.
We're all dying.
Welcome to Cosmic Insights with Evan Lobsinger. The next 3 hours now. I'm back to like 95%, I'd say. I'm a little tickle in my throat still, but I'm through the worst of it. Had a little scare there with my taste. It was fading rapidly, but back to consuming mass amounts of Terry's orange chocolate, so all is saved. On this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast, as you might have been able to glean from the intro, lots of crummy news. The World Juniors were canceled mere hours ago completely. So that is a terrible development that we'll be discussing, I'm sure, very calmly. We'll be talking about the NHL's continued fight with the most recent outbreak, how they're handling that, and delayed Red Wings games, among others. And then we're going to be talking about the Red Wings specifically, who's on their protocol, what might happen with all of that, what the tattoo squad means for them, et cetera, and then whatever other malarkey kind of comes up on this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast. But before we do all that, we do want to talk to you about the Jamie Daniels Foundation. The more we talk about substance use disorder, the faster we can end the stigma to get support to those in need. The Jamie Daniels Foundation is a children's foundation initiative that was established in memory of Jamie Daniels and founded by Jamie's father and Red Wings lead announcer Ken Daniels and Jamie's mother, Lisa Daniels Goldman. They strive to end the stigma of substance use disorder and provide support to those struggling with the disease or who are in recovery. To learn more and offer your support, visit jamiedanielsfoundation.org. Oh, still working through that fog in the brain. Getting long sentences out is a little bit difficult. Okay. The World Juniors. Let's do the ugly part first here. Tournament was canceled. Various, I don't know what you want to call it, outbreaks, positive cases, whatever it might be, really started with the American team unfortunately had to forfeit a game, and then there were more forfeits coming / happened today as the day progressed. And it was just one of those situations where you heard an inkling of a news story, and by the time you heard the inkling, it was actually happening. Czechia forfeited, or there's whispers of the tournament maybe being put on pause, and there's whispers of the tournament being canceled. And, by today at 3 or 4 or something like that, we knew for sure that the tournament was all done. So they made it all of 3-4 days.
Continuing on that, the way the news broke today was truly remarkable at the pace. I remember I was on my break at work reading about, I think it was a Bob McKenzie thread. Americans look like they can play the game tonight, explaining how the 2 players who tested positive, what protocols they had to go through, and they were basically done for the tournament. And then talking about their roommates who probably wouldn't be able to play tonight, but should be good for the rest of the tournament, barring 2 negatives. So that was the last update I read. Went back to work. There was an incident at work. Dealt with that. Open phone, whole tournament canceled. It couldn't have been more than 2 hours.
We were talking in our chat, and we were, planning out when we were going to record tonight, and we were saying we might have to delay till later in the evening / maybe even push until tomorrow, depending on when this news breaks. 3 minutes after I said that, we knew they were canceling. I'm going to sound off on this right now. I understand that this pandemic has reshaped itself time and time again, and I understand the most recent development with Omicron has just changed the game completely. I know that personally. I'm coming over it right now. I get it. I get that the rules and the policies and the planning and the guidelines were all put in place for a different set of circumstances and a different reality before this all happened. I understand that. I understand that public health units and entire countries and governing bodies and whatever else podcast hosts can't get protocol correctly across the board. So why would we think that a, International Hockey Federation would be able to get it right? I understand that. Despite all of that, the way this was set up and conducted and run, basically eyes closed, fingers crossed, praying to whoever above, was absolutely, there's no result other than this that was ever going to happen. This wasn't bad luck. This was incompetence. I'm sorry. I understand it's an opinion, and I understand it might be a harsh one, but the World Juniors were run in a way where any amount of these positive cases were going to disrupt that flow of the tournament happening. Then why were the kids playing in this tournament, the young men playing in this tournament, staying in the same hotel as non-personnel, non-players, fans? Why wasn't it a bubble in terms of who they were allowed to interact with? Why wasn't that established from the get-go if these were going to be your guidelines and your policies regarding how and when games would have to be canceled? I understand Omicron changed the game. I understand there's going to be way more positive cases than they could have ever have accounted for. But even the way it was set up from the start, I don't see how there would have been any other result here. It just seems, I don't know. I get that it's harsh. I just don't understand the rationale here from the IIHF.
It's one thing if you expect, okay, maybe if the case rates double or triple, we might have a problem. 10, 20 times plus what cases were. And there's no reality where the IIHF or Hockey Canada was planning for that. Now, that being said, even with the less contagious version, you probably still should have taken a bit more precaution than they actually did. Just with the older variations, if 1 or 2 players caught it, it probably didn't mean cancellation of the tournament. It probably meant that isolating that player and his roommate, you could get away with it. I think once we saw the positive cases coming from the American team, we knew it was over. If they stepped on the ice with another team, just with the way this variant acts, there is no way everybody else didn't have it. There was just no reality. Like, I have 3 times as many cases at work right now as I did the rest of the pandemic combined. Like, it's just the reality of the world we're living in. So if one person gets it, everybody gets it. And if you're, dealing with teammates and opponents that have Omicron, and then you go back to your hotel where there's a literal wedding reception going on. Like, yeah, it was doomed.
That's why I kept saying, I think from the start, part of it was just blind hope, like willing to turn eyes away from it. But I was just hoping nothing was going to happen to this tournament. But, you know, in retrospect, not even retrospect, you just didn't want to acknowledge it, I guess. If the NHL was shutting down, the World Juniors weren't going to make it through. Unless they had these rigid policies in place from the start, it just was not going to happen that way.
Let's send them to the Olympics. Let's restart this at the Olympics.
Brad, you know full well he does not read your Twitter feed.
I know. That's what made it even better.
We'll get back to that in a second. I just want to say, this age group, they've had a shit ride. Like, it's just been a raw deal for them from start to finish. Not to mention the women's side of things, which didn't even get its chance, which now I guess doesn't. Anyways, these kids look forward to this opportunity. This is a showcase for them to show off their talents to the world. This is them showing 32 NHL teams. This is them showing, you know, teams across the globe what they can do as prospects and professional players, future professional players. And they've lost opportunity after opportunity throughout this pandemic. And this was, for a lot of them, the last big one. And it's just a damn shame. Health and safety is first. Yes. It does not shake the fact that this is incredibly difficult for these kids. It doesn't get rid of the fact that this was, I think, in my mind, poorly managed from the start. And to varying degrees, they didn't have the opportunities that they should have had in this tournament. And then with the women's side of the game, they didn't have any opportunity to put on that showcase. We got some hockey. And you might be saying, well, yeah, we got to watch Bedard and Wright and Michkov and so on and so forth, and Owen Power. And yeah, absolutely we did. And we saw Edvinsson. But think of how many guys where this is their coming out party. This is their way to work into the first round, or this is their way to get drafted at all. They might not have been noticed before this. That's it. It sucks. There's no way around it. Not to mention the development of these players has just been absolutely torched for the past 24 months. Think of how much hockey Shane Wright has missed as a prospect. He's not having the kind of year a lot of people were expecting him to have, and how much of that can be chalked up to the fact that the guy's not really played a ton of hockey recently. Was it 25 games in the past 2 seasons? What 2 seasons should have taken place in? It's not been. It's a lot of it. Yeah, there's a lot of people sitting in their cars saying, yeah, Ryan, like that's the world we're living in right now. Or like, yeah, that's the reality of the pandemic. And you're absolutely right. It is. Doesn't stop it from being a shame. It's just a damn shame. At points, people could have done better. At points, it's all people could manage to get what we've had, but it does not stop the hurt. And there's no, but here's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like it's in my mind, it's a lot of damage that's going to feel irreparable to these prospects. Sorry for the constant doom and gloom,
but there might be a light at the end of the tunnel. They're talking about rescheduling it for the summer as a possibility.
As long as they maintain eligibility as per the tournament now, so no one ages out of it, because there are players who would age out of it by the summer. As long as you can still play if you were eligible as of December 2021, that sounds fantastic to me.
There's a very simple fix to that. You picked your roster. That's the roster you're bringing in May or June. They were eligible in December. They're eligible then. That's your roster. You're only switching someone out if they get injured between now and then.
Yeah, and then anyone who you substitute, have them be eligible per age or whatever it is. But
yeah. And it doesn't matter. You can bring anybody and you can meet whatever criteria they want because you can pick from the rest of the damn country to fill the slot, right? So, you know, they could do that for the U20s. They could do that for the women's U18s. Hopefully they can do that for a couple other tournaments because we've been so starved for hockey this season. I don't think there's anybody out there who's not going to watch a hockey tournament in June that would normally check out for the summer just because of the circumstance, right? Like, obviously, will it get the ratings that it would around Christmas and New Year's like it does every year? No. But Edmonton can only half fill that arena right now. I mean, with everybody getting COVID, there's a good chance that not many people are going to have COVID in June. So we might see full capacity arenas again. The IIHF, in a sick and twisted way, could win from this because they could make more money because they can fill the buildings. Like, these are all possibilities. The inverse is also very possible as well, where things just continue to get worse. But at that point, you don't rehost it, so it's a moot point anyway. So, yeah, ideally, all the tournaments that got canceled this month could be made up in, May, June, possibly even July. It's already being discussed. Most people say if it's feasible, they'd be on board. But there's still a lot to go into that, so hopefully it works out, but I'm at the point where I'm not holding my breath.
I'd want it to be where they could get it in before the draft confidently. Like, you need it in before the draft. Otherwise, there won't be a point. Well, not that there would be no point to playing, but it would have the biggest impact for the players, especially the ones I was talking about who aren't obvious picks to be displayed before the draft. I think that's kind of fun to shake up draft lists that close to the draft. It's a little artificial and scouts will hate it, but it would be fun for the viewers. And like you mentioned, I want all tournaments that were canceled. I want the same energy being put forward on both sides of the game. And I understand that there's not going to be as much money garnered from, for example, the women's tournament. It's not really the point though, right? Like, it's an investment in them, the players, their development, and it's investment in the future game as well. We don't need to get into all the obvious points about why it should be done. It should be done. In good faith, it should be done. So if they do it for one, I want to see them do it for all. But yeah, I think the summer would be cool. A lot of logistical hurdles, and not saying it's automatic, so I don't think anyone should go out there expecting. And coming from someone who just criticized the IIHF and I believe Hockey Canada, or the Oilers actually were involved in the organization of the tournament, I had a lot of criticisms for them, but rescheduling for the summer is no small task. So hope for it. Fingers crossed. And I hope they gun for it, but I dare I say, if we've learned anything over the last 2 years, let's not try to plan 6 months out. It's usually a recipe for failure.
Yeah, for those people who are saying, well, at least 2022 can't be any worse, don't tempt fate. I'm not a superstitious person, but maybe just don't.
Yeah. Let's talk about the good things. What did we see from the Red Wings prospect in that tournament? A very limited amount, first of all. I mean, the Americans got one game in, so how much of Carter Mazur and Red Savage did we see? Fantastic hit from Carter Mazur. I thought he looked great in pre-tournament play. Red Savage had that high hit that he got tossed from the game for, and other than that, they didn't really get a chance to showcase much. Cossa didn't even dress. Sebastian Cossa didn't even dress for Canada, which...
Yeah, that's because second pre-tournament game was a goddamn disaster, so that not surprising. I shouldn't say it was surprising. I thought he was going to be the backup to Dylan Garand, because Garand was a returning player and has better numbers in the WHL this year, but yeah, Brochu's not all that good, so I thought Cossa would at least get the backup role over him, so that was disappointing. But like I said, I think he let in, 7 or 8 goals in his second pre-tournament game, so yeah, he pitched the shutout in the first game and then got smoked in the second, so it happens.
Yeah, and you know what? And I'm not sitting here saying it's some kind of conspiracy. But as someone who's followed Hockey Canada before, they're always weird with goalies. They're very weird with goalies. I can't think of a major international tournament where the Canadians... You can probably count on one hand the amount of times the Canadians have had one goalie and had that stay the goalie of the tournament through and through. It's kind of like the hallmark of Canadian international hockey is you do a goalie switch and all of a sudden the team is on fire and the goalie is on fire. And anyways, I think Cossa would have factored in at some point throughout the tournament. I was kind of expecting it, but was ashamed to not see him dress. In the end, it didn't matter. Donovan Sebrango scored.
Was good. Was very good. He had so obviously the game against Austria, not a lot you can read from that game. Other than he had like, I forget who he set up, but set one of his teammates up for a breakaway on like a ridiculous 120-foot seam breakout pass. That was just beautiful. But yeah, in the game against Czechia, he had a really strong game defensively, and things were going off the rails for Canada early. They were down 3-1 early in the first period, which I didn't think anybody thought was going to happen. And then Owen Power got it within one, and then sure enough, last minute of the first period, Czechs have a 2-on-1. They kind of fumble the puck a bit. Sebrango steps up, takes it, makes a quick pass, turns it, jumps into the rush, ties the game. Like, fun fact, that's his first goal in North America since he was a Kitchener Ranger 2 years ago. So it's good to see him.
That's funny.
Yeah. So it was good to see him refine his offensive form, because he actually was a pretty decent offensive defenseman in Kitchener, just, jumping to the AHL level at an 18-year-old that went about how you would expect offensively. But yeah, he had a really, really solid tournament. First real international play for him in a while, since I want to say he was 16 or 17 in the U17s. So yeah, 16. And he looked comfortable and was playing a regular shift for Canada. Take that as a huge, huge plus in his development. He was skating ahead of defensemen who were drafted ahead of him in the same draft. So looking like a real good pick right now.
Emil Viro, I thought, looked good as well. Would have loved to have had more tournament. I was really excited to watch him. And Jan Bednash, again, the Czechs can only glean so much from that.
He had a really good game against Germany.
Oh, yeah?
Really good game. There was a lot of shots. He lost in overtime on a puck that he probably should have stopped in overtime, but I forget. He only allowed one goal on, I want to say it was like 30-something shots. He had a strong game.
And I guess the story of the very limited tournament for the Red Wings won't come as a surprise are the Swedes. Theodor Niederbach and Simon Edvinsson. Niederbach first, 2 goals in 2 games. Again, I thought looked impressive, factored into the team's play in a big way. In my mind, that's another player where the Red Wings may have. You think about Sebrango, where a guy who wasn't picked in the first round, but still should be a significant asset for them. Theodor Niederbach in the same vein there for me. Those 2 goals were, again, you want to see more tournament, same as Vero. You want to see more tournament to see a bigger sample size, see how he factors into play, especially in key games over the course of time, but was nice to see him net those.
Well, Sweden had a game against Russia, so that was one of the better matchups of the few games that were played where it was power against power. Niederbach obviously looked very, very good that game. He was shooting more, which was a positive, because that's been one of the criticisms against him, is he's not aggressive enough with the puck. So for him to walk away with 2 goals is not nothing. But yeah, he definitely, as far as the Red Wings prospects goes, he wasn't the story for Sweden.
Simon Edvinsson. Man, the way that guy moves at his size, it just never fails to blow me away.
You could make the case he was the best player in the tournament, albeit how brief it was. There's other guys, Bedard, Michkov, and a few other guys who would definitely get consideration. Edvinsson was in that conversation. He was having himself a tournament. 3 points against Russia, including a short-handed breakaway goal as a defenseman, which is just damn impressive. His transition game was incredible. His defensive game was solid. He was making things happen in the offensive zone constantly. Yeah, obviously it sucks for everybody. Even a guy like Sebrango was having a very good tournament, and this looked like it was going to be a really good confidence boost for him. This was shaping up to be Simon Edvinsson's breakout party for the rest of the world. Like, we've been following him in the SHL, so we know how good of a season he's had. Nobody outside of Red Wings land and prospectors are really paying attention, so they don't really know. This could have been his platform to go, yeah, guys, I probably should have went higher in that draft. But it is what it is. At least he had 2 very, very good games, so we're not walking away disappointed at all. But yeah, for him above everybody else, it was a real shame he couldn't get more games in.
I think Bedard and Michkov would have been for obvious reasons and probably well-deserved reasons, the eventual MVP conversation leads. But yeah, I agreed. Edvinsson was he dominated play. He drove play. He was the most apparent player on the ice every time he was on there. Just looked so good. And again, it was a couple of games, some pre-tournament play. It is what it is. It's a small sample size, but it's really nice for that to be displayed for Red Wings fans. Any kind of new test, any kind of view into progress, to development, to how this guy might factor into the Red Wings in the future is a welcome one. And much like Seider before him, he has passed outstandingly so far. Different player. It's not that he's not the same style of player as Seider, of course, but watching him play, you're like, oh, I'm going to be, as of right now, I'll be pretty surprised if he doesn't factor into the Red Wings blue line next year. He could have a bad camp, right? The same way Raymond could have not made the Red Wings. He had to play his way onto the team. He could have a bad camp, but as of right now, I view this as within Simon Edvinsson's control whether or not he's playing for the Red Wings next year. It's not really a hot take, but
opportunity is going to be there. Everybody on the left side of this defense, but Jordan Oesterle is a UFA. There's going to be a spot to win, and he is in the driver's seat. I know a lot of people are comparing him to Seider. The one thing that is worth noting going into next training camp is Mo Seider, because of the pandemic and everything, had 2 full years between his draft and when he made his Red Wings debut. This would only be 1 season between for Edvinsson, so he won't be as far along his development path as Seider was going into this season. So even if Edvinsson's impressive, but he's has a much slower start than Seider did, which, let's be honest, he will, because look at what the hell Seider's doing this year. It is going to be with the context of Seider had a full extra year to develop. So if Edvinsson doesn't make the Red Wings next year, it's not the end of the world. It might be even for the better, just because, well, the Red Wings will look at Mo Seider and go, oh, yeah, that worked. Let's do that again. So it's definitely within the realm of possibility, but I think you're right in the fact that there's a strong chance the way he's playing, he could do what Lucas Raymond did this year and just force the Red Wings' hand. Because we all assumed he was going to Grand Rapids. He came into preseason and went, the hell I am. And it worked out well. Edvinsson's going to have every chance to do that next year. Will he, won't he? Who knows? Especially, it might be tricky though, because if he stays in the SHL, that means he probably doesn't come over for training camp. So the Red Wings will have to make up their mind pretty early of he's either staying in the SHL or we're going to audition him between Grand Rapids and Detroit. So, which is what I would do, honestly. So, but we won't know.
I don't see a world where they're not in the NHL, or he's not not in North America next year in some capacity.
Yeah, unless there's some pandemic reasons again, where, people try to restrict travel as much as possible and yada, yada, yada. But by that point, even if you want to be a little optimistic, he should be in North America.
You're saying we're still going to be talking about the pandemic in in that many months? No, I think Edvinsson, and you pointed to this, Brad, and I think it's a very fair point. There's more opportunity with him on the defense, on the defensive side of things, just in terms of personnel. Like you said, Oesterle is the only one signed on the left side through next year, correct? Yeah. There's not a lot.
Literally the only one. Stahl, DeKaiser, Leddy, all UFAs.
There's not a lot in his way, and in terms of the Red Wings forwards this year that Lucas Raymond had to work through, that was a much more substantial list. I think in reality, Steve Yzerman was loading this team as if Lucas Raymond wasn't going to break through. Like, there was contingency plans. He had to outplay a lot of guys, especially to make the first line. So it's not quite the same, and I think you also made a very good point that I want to repeat. Don't expect what Seider is doing out of Edvinsson. You can't expect every rookie to put up Calder level performances to come in. And that does not mean that they are a lesser player. It does that does not mean they have a lower ceiling or anything like that. It's just, it's hard to be a rookie in the NHL. It's very hard to be a potential rookie of the year in the NHL. We're just kind of blessed to have 2 of them on the Red Wings right now. So overall, terrible news that the tournament was canceled. Terrible for the players. Just bad vibes all around. But from what we saw from Edvinsson and Niederbach and a few other of the Red Wings prospects, Sebrango, there are some positives to draw from this. So, wasn't all great, but at least we got to see Edvinsson dominate. I do love how the rest of the hockey world is slowly taking notice of the Red Wings again, and they keep like telling Red Wings fans to like say, "Hey, like heads up, they like don't feel bad. This team might be good again soon." And Red Wings fans are like, "Yeah, we've been watching."
We start prospect profiles in November. We know.
Yeah. We were there for his baptism. Trust me, we're okay.
Yeah,
we know.
We've been scouting this kid since he was 3.
Yeah.
The one guy who, if we're going to talk about people who had bad tournaments in the smallest of sample sizes, so I thought Yaroslav Askarov looked terrible again. I don't know what his problem is with these World Junior tournaments, but I expected him to be throwing up donuts immediately, and he got pulled, right? He looked terrible. Like, his stance is like so wide and his hands are in a very awkward position. I don't really see any NHL goalies play that way. So he's going to have to change something, because I expected him to be very, very good. And that first game was another big head scratcher.
Sorry to circle back to a conversation we had earlier, just because IIHF President Luc Tardif is doing his presser now. Yeah. He says they hope to come back with a quote unquote good surprise in the next month or two. And he's making it clear he wants to restart the competition in a better way. And then Scott Wheeler adds, as reported, this summer is their focus.
All right. Fingers crossed. To Evan's point about the goalies, yeah, really Wallstedt was the only big name goalie prospect who walked away from this tournament looking any better. I think it re-solidified him in a lot of people's minds as the top goaltending prospect right now. But yeah, Askarov, that one's...
This is his third year in the tournament, right? Like, you'd expect him... And he plays in a men's league. He's played in the KHL since he was like 16 years old. Like, this tournament should be like... playing like this is a practice. This should be practice environment for him.
It's funny because we're about to preach, don't panic about Kosa because of one preseason or pre-tournament game that had him scratched. Every goalie is going to put up stinkers, and then we're also going to sit here and have this conversation about Askarov. But yeah, this like you're saying here, Evan, this isn't the first time I think he hasn't had a stellar performance, to say the least. You got to be a little bit worried about the kind of draft capital that was spent on Yaroslav Askarov. Something does have to change, seemingly.
Definitely still young, and obviously there's a ton of potential in his game, and he can definitely adjust to a North American style of goaltending. You just would hope to see in a tournament like this that he's just a brick wall and nothing is getting past him, but it was still some of the same questions we probably had last year about his performances. It's just very... very perplexing, really.
That's a shame that's another shame about the shortened tournament is like goalies get such a raw deal in these tournaments. You're not playing with the defensive group you usually play with. You're not playing with the same systems often that you're used to playing with. You're not playing against the same shooters you've been, well versed against all year. It's hard for them. And if there's anyone shaken up by international tournaments the most, it's goaltenders. And you only remember goaltenders by single games, right? Not entire periods. It's hard. They have one bad game and you have no opportunity to recover, especially if the tournament gets canceled like this. So now all people are going to remember is Kosa didn't get on the bench even for a game. All people are going to remember is Askarov's stinker, and you don't have the rest of the tournament to play through to try to redeem yourself. And even if you have a bad tournament, that does not make an entire goalie prospect, but they just get a raw deal. I keep thinking back to my one time we were playing and we had a backup goalie come in for a huge playoff game. We ended up winning in overtime. It was game 7. We won in overtime. He made a couple key saves and we were talking to him in the room after. And I told the story before on the podcast, but we were kind of like laughing. We were like, oh man, that must have been intense. And he looked shaken. Like he came in cold. He said, you don't understand. You make a bad play you might, I don't know, you have to go recover or whatever. It's a mess afterwards. He's like, if I make a bad play, we lose the game. And it's just a whole different ballgame for goalies is what I'm trying to say. So you feel for Askarov, you feel for Kosa, but yeah, you make a good point, Evan. There's something to be thought there for Askarov in general. I tweeted this, and I want to give it a couple minutes of conversation as well. Shane Wright, in my mind, still the best prospect of this draft, still a worthy first overall pick, still whoever wins that lottery is going to be getting a fantastic player, or should at least. It really is, though, Michkov and Bedard. Those are the guys who we might be talking about years from now as defining their generation of draft classes. I know people might be saying, you say this every year about this guy. You said that about Lafreniere. You said that about Wright, and you're always moving on. It's like I just want to put it in relative terms. I wouldn't take anything back that I said about Lafreniere, his development notwithstanding, or Shane Wright so far. But Bedard and Michkov, these guys scream special. Like,
if Bedard and Wright were both eligible for the draft this year, I'd still take Bedard. Like,
oh yeah,
no
doubt about it. No doubt about it. He's a year younger and is having a better year / better tournament. The last guys we talked about to be McDavid, Matthews level type first overall picks was McDavid and Matthews. There hasn't been a guy like that in the draft. Now, we had hope, and there's still possibility Shane Wright could be like maybe towards the Matthews tier, but it's looking less and less likely as the year goes on. Although, like Ryan said, he's still, as of now, the slam dunk number one. Bedard and Michkov are Matthews, McDavid level possibilities. Like, Connor Bedard was the first 16-year-old to score a hat trick for Team Canada in the World Juniors since Wayne Gretzky. And then just for good measure, he scored one more. And I know people are going to say, oh yeah, it was Austria. Well, Crosby and Spezza and Lindros and McDavid and all the other 16-year-olds who played in this tournament, they all played the bottom feeders. They all had the, Denmark's and Germany's and whatever the worst team was any given tournament. They played them. They didn't put up 4 goals. Even in the game against Czechia, it took Bedard like a period to move from the 13th forward to a top 6 role. Actually, I think Bedard got his first point in the first period on Sebrango's goal. He's special. So is Michkov. Michkov might even be better. But Michkov's definitely going second overall, though, because of that KHL contract situations, because you're getting 3 extra years out of Bedard versus what you're going to get out of Michkov. And Michkov is a late 2004 born, whereas Connor Bedard is a true 2005 born. So that's worth noting already. But it's crazy to think Michkov could be in this tournament for 2 more years after this. His KHL team lets him go.
Watching them play, you get the same kind of vibes as when you watch McDavid, or I hesitate to say Crosby and Ovechkin, and probably the McDavid comparisons will seem foolish by the end, because you're talking about guys who are on top 10, 15, 20 all-time lists, right? But you watch the way Connor McDavid plays hockey, you're like, oh, he does whatever he wants on the ice. He's not playing hockey, he's deciding hockey. He's deciding how this game is being played on his shift. Michkov and Bedard give you a lot of that. And you notice that right away with them. You know when they're on the ice, you know when they do things, they just make things happen, and it's almost seemingly at will. Every facet of their game. It's almost comforting to know that the Red Wings are going to be good. Too good at that point to really factor into the draft lottery conversation. Or even if they miss the playoffs next year, it won't be, barring some kind of regression. Anything can happen year over year, injuries, whatever, just a random bad year. Even if the Red Wings are out of the playoffs, so they likely won't even be in range to win and move up to first or second overall. And that's almost comforting, because to lose a draft lottery where those guys are in it is like, ooh. We wouldn't be able to stop ourselves from hyping it up like at all. Does not matter everything we've learned over the past however many years of doing this podcast and covering the draft lottery and these prospects. Those prospects are good enough where we would not be able to resist hyping it, and then just the heartbreak that would come after. Just we would break ourselves to pieces.
Yeah, we're sitting here losing our mind because the Red Wings lost the last 3 draft lotteries. But right now, you can make the case the Red Wings have the best player from each of those drafts. Seider's making a case. Raymond's making a case. Edvinsson's making a case. Are any of them going to likely be number 1 overall in a redraft? No, probably not. But the fact they're all in the conversation's a really damn good sign. And even though, like I said, the odds are not in favor of the Red Wings getting Shane Wright this year. But hey, this is a very deep draft at center. A position of need for the Red Wings. How convenient. So for how worst case scenario it's actually been playing out best case, worst case scenario so far.
Yeah.
So, if, like you said, if they're not in a position to lose the Bedard, Michkov, and even Adam Fantilli, who's going to be in the top 3 with those guys, is looking unreal. Yeah, that's probably the time where it would actually kill you to not win the draft lottery. So if you're not going to win the draft lottery, it's better to not be a part of it.
Some people are asking about, or some people might be asking, and we might have glazed past this with Michkov. Matvei Michkov has a 5-year contract that he's currently on with SKA St. Petersburg in the KHL, which means unless there's some kind of clause in that contract that we don't know about where there's an NHL exit or any kind of funny business goes on there, he won't be available until the 2025-2026 season. So even though his draft year is 2023, he's not going to be available for until 3 seasons later. Which for a player of his caliber, all things projecting, is a noted disadvantage to the point where even if he's marginally better than Bedard, he'll likely be drafted behind. That's the information as of today. Let's talk closer to his draft day. Let's see what's changed, but just so you know. Really, all the tournament, the reason the tournament was canceled was so Brad Lambert was stopped having a great tournament, so he might actually still have a chance of falling to Detroit, but he looked good.
Tony, making the prophecy self-fulfilling.
Yeah. How annoying. Lambert comes out firing, does great. Everyone's like, oh, he's not going to drop down so many boards. And now we're just like, oh, damn it. That was a potential Red Wings pick later on.
Hey, Logan Cooley didn't get to play that much, so maybe that's the play now. I don't know.
What insights do you have on other guys who might be within Detroit's range from the tournament, if there were any?
Juracek got hurt very early in the Canada-Czechia game, so even though he looked good for the, 20 minutes he played, not much to glean there. Slovakia had a lot of draft-eligible prospects, but they put up kind of a stinker in their one game against the States. Like, they were competitive, but none of those guys really did anything to stand out. Cooley looked good that game, but again, not a ton to stand out. The only draft-eligible guys that elevated their stock in a very small sample size was Bedard, Michkov, and probably Brad Lambert. Not a whole hell of a lot to write home about anybody else. Like even Shane Wright, he looked fine, but he didn't do enough one way or the other to really change his draft stock. So we are pretty much in the same spot we were before the World Juniors.
We just got some cool Edvinsson's really good clips.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah. Not to discount
and Donovan Sebrango finally got to score a goal.
Yeah. It was more than that, but it's a small sample size and it's fun to joke about it. Okay, let's transition into some NHL talk and specifically the Red Wings. So, as predicted, almost with the Red Wings in the NHL, there were going to be further postponements of games beyond just the 27th. So, obviously, the 27th was postponed, as was against the Rangers, as was the 29th against the Islanders. Both of those were away games for the Red Wings. So right now we're recording on the 29th and not, covering a game. So that's a given. The next scheduled game for the Red Wings is the 31st, so New Year's Eve game against the Capitals at home. 7:30 Eastern. And it's not to say that that's automatically going to be postponed. NHL games have been happening. They've been basically working by jurisdiction. Like, are they in Canada? Do they have to cross the border? What's the local, public health protocol, et cetera, et cetera. It's all a big disorganized mess, which is the tagline for COVID in professional sports right now. But the Red Wings currently on protocol are Adam Ernie, Jordan Osterley, Lucas Raymond, who was added over the holidays, and Nick Leddy. Ernie and Osterley might come off the protocol tomorrow, I believe. Veleno and Gagne came off today. Zadina and Nedeljkovic came off earlier this week. So it's players are going to be coming in and out. So we'll see. I actually have a glimmer of optimism that the 31st, the New Year's Eve game, might go.
The list of Red Wings who have not been put on the COVID list this season is much shorter than the list of players who have. So not every team is through the worst of it yet, but the Red Wings are through the worst of it, because the only significant players on the Red Wings who haven't been put in the COVID protocol yet are Larkin and Seider, if I'm not mistaken. Because Bertuzzi has, Raymond has, Nedeljkovic has, Leddy has.
You're asking for jinx territory
it's gonna happen.
Here.
Like, it's not an if they end up on the protocol. They're going to. That's just the way it's going right now. That's why so many games have been postponed. Zadina has been on the list. Not that it's ever good for anybody to get COVID, but the Red Wings having so many players on the COVID list and in the protocol and in the quarantine during the pause is a benefit versus the rest of the league who had to go through it before, or it's going to go through it coming up. We were joking about it. We're never happy that Lucas Raymond got COVID, but at least a week of his quarantine was when there were no Red Wings games scheduled, which is a benefit, because as of right now and before Friday, he has missed 0 games while on the COVID protocol, which, for him and the Red Wings is a plus, because the less games he misses, the better, because there's a reality now where the only game he'll miss might be New Year's Eve. So, depending on when he tests negative and yada, 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 it might be a bit longer. Based on the NHL's new protocols, there's a reality too. He might even play New Year's Eve. Unlikely, but there's, from what I was to understand reading it, a possibility, because it's only a 5-day quarantine now, and he tested positive, I want to say, Christmas Eve, although that hasn't been confirmed, I don't think. So
yeah, let me jump in with that, actually. So there's been 2 major changes to the NHL's protocols. And, like I mentioned in episodes past, this was always going to come, and the protocol is going to continue to be adjusted. First of all is the addition or the reemergence of the taxi squad. So we're going to see a version of the taxi squad come back this season, which was always on the table. I think they had that kind of in their back pocket. So pretty much teams will be allowed to have a taxi squad of up to 6 players to make emergency recalls from the minors if COVID absences would cause anyone to play without a full lineup. Under the new rules, any team that has is any shy of having 12 forwards, 6 defensemen, and 2 goalies available can bring up a player from the AHL without playing a game with fewer than 18 skaters. So they pretty much are going to be protected against having to be in that situation, which was happening, and it's garbage. Emergency recalls can be made up of players with salary cap hits of $1 million or less, which is an increase from the previous limit. I think it was set at the minimum salary or $850 or whatever it was. They can be, and then there's a bunch of other provisions. They can be on the taxi squad for 20 days. They'll be in the minors as per cap purposes, or for cap purposes as per last time. It's a little different. The rules are, as convoluted and annoying as you're going to expect. You're going to see a ton of paper moves again. You're going to see a lot of that. The fact that they're in the minors for cap rules means that there is going to be some money saving. I think there's a protection or something. They get like a $500 per day additional payment or whatever it is for being on the taxi squad for anyone who cares about the real dollars. Anyhow, that has come into play. And also, in accordance with the adjustment to the CDC guidelines, the NHL and the NHLPA have agreed to modify the isolation period after a positive test from 10 days to 5 days for fully vaccinated players who meet the required conditions. And the conditions have something to do with tests, whether they're asymptomatic, whether they have a fever, how many negative tests that they can produce in X amount of hours, whatever it might be. And then they have to also be cleared by the physician. There's all those rules in it. But pretty much if they meet those standards, then there's a potential that it's no longer a 10-day isolation, it's a 5. So that feeds into what Brad was saying about Lucas Raymond. But in general, it is better news for the league that if these guys are asymptomatic and, it's clear that they've recovered sooner, they're not out for a week and a half anymore. It's 5 days, fewer games missed. And there's a potential here that the season might be able to run along less impeded. I don't want to say unimpeded. That's not a thing anymore.
This earmuffs for the children in the room, but this is literally the NHL going, fuck it. We're powering through. If you get COVID, you get COVID.
It's, again, I don't like doing public health policy on this show. I'm neither a doctor, as my parents will remind you, nor do I play one on a podcast. The extent to which I was confident speaking medically on anything ended after my first ever organic chemistry midterm. But in all seriousness, the NHL's policy here is, hey, everyone's struggling right now with Omicron. It's ripping through everybody. The best we can do is mitigate. And whether you like it or not, and whether it's, wholly inhuman and indecent and just kind of crass to say, they're gonna potentially be in a window of clear here. They're gonna have some breathing room because a lot of these guys, as Brad has said, have either had it or will have it soon. It's just kind of seems to be the nature of the beast. And so they're going to mitigate as much as they can, but I actually see a way out here for the NHL. I think they might make it to the end of the season. I just want to add one thing in this, and I think it should be an assumption, but it's worth saying it aloud again. If this is coming off as crass or, inhumane or, we're talking about people and people's lives, that's not lost on us. This is something that's affecting everyone. The human element of this isn't lost, but for people who are sometimes upset by how we approach this, it's a little objectifying. You're joking around about players' health. It's never taken lightly. It's a little bit it's the reality of the situation we're in, and it's a commentary on the hockey aspect of it only. The only reason there's comfort in discussing this is because the league seems to be protected from severe cases or severe adverse effects, which has something that's fortunately held true so far. And this is something, we tweet it and we say it every time. Anytime anyone's added to the list, we hope they get through it well. Hopefully it's nothing bad. And they get over it quickly if they end up feeling it at all. But just know that the human element of this is not lost on us, and it should be an assumption every time that is the first and foremost thought from not just our minds, but anyone, any fans, anyone talking about this, anyone covering it. There just aren't enough hours on each podcast to give that the credence it needs every episode, because it's the reality of every waking moment of our lives for the past 2 years. Off my
I'm glad you still have the energy to give that disclaimer, because I am well past it. I don't give a shit.
I know we sometimes go a long time without saying
yeah,
but
I think people know that when we talk about this at this point, we're talking, this is how the NHL's viewing it, and this is how the NHL is handling it, and this is in the context of hockey.
We're not doctors. Evan just plays one on our podcast.
And the NHL also just got gifted 3 weeks to use to book any games that they need to make up. So it's really is a win-win for the NHL right now.
They're going to lie about a lot of tests the week before that so that COVID party gets extra strong, so all the players are on the protocol during the break. Bettman, that thought's crossed Bettman's head at least once.
How much break is there actually going to be? It's just going to be filled with rescheduled games.
Well, depending on arena availability, it might not be as many as you would think. There'll be some, but I don't think it's going to be a ton.
Okay. Any other league news that we want to talk about? Because so much else has happened. Happy belated birthday to Mickey Redmond.
There's a Winter Classic game.
Nobody cares.
I feel like no one's talking about that at all.
Because nobody cares, and they haven't for years.
Well,
Unless
isn't there
like your market, nobody cares.
There's also severe weather, like a severe weather warning, and I've already seen the thing that they're going to go through it, like they're going to play through it, and like I don't blame them at this point, but I understand how this is just the universe throwing everything at them. I guess the only other thing, we'll save the Brad Marchand tweet for another day because I think that's a really interesting conversation about the Olympics, and we've talked about the Olympics the last couple episodes.
Listen, the NHL's not unhappy about it. That's about as far as I'll go with that.
I think it's poignant that he tweeted that, and his owner, Jeremy Jacobs, is definitely not on his side with it. But that's just owner-player relationship at all. But anyways, we'll save that for a different episode. Why don't we take this chance to jump into overtime here and take some questions from our incredible, incredible Patreon supporters. All Winged Wheel podcast patrons, I said it to you before, but a belated Merry Christmas, a happy holidays, however or whatever you celebrate. We hope you've had a safe and healthy and restful holiday so far. I know I did. We're intensely grateful for all the support you all show us, and especially through the holidays. You're the reason this show's able to happen. You're the reason we're able to transition between being in studio to having to do these remote podcasts. And this is the last, hopefully for a while, remote podcast. We'll be back in studio for next episode. I'm out of quarantine as of tomorrow.
There you go. You've done jinxed me.
Yeah. You two are next. Anyhow, patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast if you want to help support the show.
It's more likely than not.
A question from Ryan Kearns says, "Hey boys, when Edvinsson was drafted, Brad said he had questions about his hockey IQ and his pace. With what you've seen from him this season, where he's apparently playing very well, and the World Juniors, has that evaluation changed?"
The pace one hasn't. The hockey IQ has. He still plays slow. Relatively speaking, like he plays faster than most of his peers because he's just that much better, but relative to other top prospects, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, he does seem to be making way better decisions this year with and without the puck, which is a phenomenal development. The biggest development that you could have hoped for.
Yeah. I would also boil the hockey IQ question more down to decision making solely, rather than hockey IQ as a broader concept, because I think that's bigger than just decision making. But harking back to his draft day, that was something where people thought there's room for refinement. People being us, but just for anyone looking to evaluate his game, that's a little bit more of what we were talking about. Cody Stark says, World Junior question: how bad are the overreactions because of this 2-week tournament? Like, if the Red Wings should have chosen Kosa over Wallstedt, because Kosa didn't play too well and Wallstedt played great for 2 games. Any other overreactions like this from past years that you can think of?
There's always
Quentin
a couple
Byfield,
guys.
Who've been in the top 2 picks for the past 25 years? I'll blanket cover that.
Nail Yakupov.
Byfield didn't have good
huge
tournaments and still went top 2, so he's kind of the opposite of that argument. It's worked positively and negatively before. I remember the World Juniors was the first time people started really shooting Nico Hischier up the draft boards because he had a really strong tournament. None are coming to mind off the top of my head, but there have been players who had really strong World Juniors and then pretty mediocre rest of their draft seasons and then got drafted higher than they should have. It's always going to go both ways. This year, it's probably going to mute that a little bit because, like we said, there's not a whole hell of a lot you can glean from this tournament, especially from the draft eligible guys.
MF says, if Larkin continues to play at the level he's at right now, is he the elusive contender 1C we've been looking for? Has his play raised the level of expectations moving forward?
I feel like we've had this conversation every 2 weeks. Yes, he's a legitimate number 1C, but as the Red Wings are constructed right now, he can't be your only C to be a contender. If they get another Larkin, it can happen. If they have to settle for a good but subpar second line seed, no, they probably can't do it unless they go with the Nashville model or of just having the most ridiculous defense and goaltending you can imagine.
Larkin can be your first line center on a cup winning team, but yeah, the support needs to be there. I will go so far as to say it doesn't have to be an excellent second line center. I think you can have a above average second line center, but if that's the case with Larkin and then player X who's just above average for your second line, you need play driving wingers.
And there's no two teams are built the same. Like, Larkin could be literally your only center if all your top six wingers are Artemi Panarin and Nikita Kucherov. Like, there are ways to do this, but when you have two very strong top six centers, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to build out the rest of the roster.
Question here from Matt S. says, this semi-lockdown has given me 2020 vibes. I thought this was 2021 going into 2022. Who are some teams you think that are currently in a playoff spot that will not be come the spring, and some teams that are currently out that will turn it around? Hope you three had a great Christmas with your families. Keep up the good work as always, dubs.
The obvious answer here is Detroit. Sad as it is to say. Yeah. I don't even remember who's in the playoff spot in the West. Let me go look that up quick.
Nashville out, Winnipeg in.
Nashville, who's currently in a Central Division seed.
Yeah, that's a good answer because I still don't have any faith.
Nashville's won 7 in a row somehow.
Yeah, so in the East, the only obvious one I would say would be Detroit out, Boston in. But based on points percentage, we're already there. In the West, man, I don't know how much I believe in Anaheim, but the cushion they've built up might be hard to overcome. And actually looking at Nashville, maybe same.
Yeah, I said firmly, but I guess they're kind of in it with St. Louis right now based on points percentage because Colorado just has fewer games played. That's why they're lower down on that list.
Wow, Edmonton's fallen all the way to the second wild card? Holy shit. What a dumpster.
Wow, it's crazy what happens when your two best players in the world don't score.
And your defense is somehow worse than Detroit's.
Vancouver's won 6 in a row, and there's still so many spots.
Vancouver and Anaheim out.
Well, Vancouver's not in.
I'm saying they're going to be in.
Oh. Well, I mean,
no, they're definitely not. But
yeah, Winnipeg's the only team out of a playoff spot in the West that I think probably should be in, but I don't have a good contender who to replace them with. Yeah, that could actually get fun.
Some of these questions we obviously have the Patreon exclusive overtime that we post after the episode. And we'll answer all of them, but we have another one here. C nods, and it harks back to Larkin, actually, the question just from now. Can we take a moment and talk about Larkin? He's on a nearly 45 goal pace over 82 games and has looked electric, dominant, and dynamic. Are we seeing the Lucas Raymond effect, or is he living up to his potential, or is it something else? Great pod, guys, and Happy New Year.
Both.
It's got to be both.
Both.
Jeremy Dolphin says, Edvinsson is looking incredible, and I can't wait to see him in the winged wheel. Do you think they'll play him with Seider right away once he makes the team, or have them play a part to split up the talent a bit? I can't see them going wrong either way, but as a fan, I definitely prefer to see them on a pairing together.
So a lot of people have thrown it out there, because obviously we've made a million jokes about the Seider-Edvinsson pairing being the best pairing in the league. But if you separate them for 50 minutes of a 60-minute game, you could have Simon Edvinsson and Mo Seider on the ice, which is pretty damn tempting. So that's probably the right answer.
Yeah, the reality here is you're going to see a little bit of both. And that's going to naturally happen. I don't imagine a situation where we're not going to see at least a lot of Seider or Edvinsson together in the future. But again, that's going to be dictated by what else the Red Wings do on their left side. When Edvinsson comes in, that's not the defense solved, right? Like, that's absolutely not the case. They still have a lot of work to do. You can't have Edvinsson be your only solution. You need other guys to pan out. You need other good players to pan out. your whole defense can't fall on those two guys. Your team can't be based off a couple of players at each position. It's just not sustainable winning hockey. So until the Red Wings have that depth, you're going to see a lot. There's just a lot more potential for Seider and Edvinsson not to play together. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast and start recording our Patreon exclusive version. Thank you all so much for tuning in and for bearing with our holiday break and for these remote episodes. Again, all things going to plan, which they don't anymore. We'll be back in studio next episode. We'd like to thank all of our listeners, our name level sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast. Arjun Shanker, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Kyle Karagitz, Nick Perks, Brett Bailey, Terry, driver of the number 69 Crying Ryan Hanna Banana Slam and Jamathon, Taylor Tadgel, Matthew M. Rice, Brandon M., Carl Brutana Nanolewski, Chimmy, Citizen High Five, CJ Sully, Clayton Van Dyken, Craig Kibble, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Give Blood Fight Probert, Greach, Hana Lee, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Jake Kiefer, Justin and the Angry Mob, Kaylin Wood, King Tone, Kyle Hashman, Matt McKay, R.A., Ryan Hubbard, Scott Martin, Stay Fresh Cheesebags, Zach Spring, Zarly Zalapski, Andrew Bohan, Sam Bankson, Adam I Wish I Could Finish Like Ernie, Antonio Gracias, Babe Landeskog, Ben Barron, Connor Leighton, Dave W., Eric Sinkowski, Evan watching Die Hard on Christmas morning, Evan's Tub Bubble, Evan's Bingo Card, James Laporte, Jeffrey Dunst, Jeremy Brocker, John Evans, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Logan Stull, Matt Keeler, Matt S., Max $1 million, Revi DeLuca, Terry Actual, Trevor Pevivar, Zach Handyside, and Zach McCann, a driving range superstar. Thank you all so much. Hopefully by the time we talk again, we'll have seen the Red Wings play. We'll see how it goes.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.